There's only one way to
Yes.
find out.
Yes, I did.
Haha.
Hello! Hello, 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 and welcome to this Final Boss Fight live stream of World Building. My name is John, and I am joined by Ben in the corner.
It's a pleasure to be here, John. And hello to everyone out there.
And we are gonna do some world building tonight. It's gonna be an interesting stream. We're gonna kick off by pressing play on, I think, the Epic playlist. Sounds Pendragon Nomad has resubscribed with Twitch Prime. They've been here for 14 months. Back at it again with the dragon stuff. And I've just learned that apparently if I put Ben down there, he goes over the top of alerts. So I'm going to pop Ben up in that corner.
Whoa.
Can I work out how to flip Ben's camera very quickly as well?
I can always try and adjust myself here.
Oh, no, I've
Please
turned you upside down.
I'm in Australia. How about that if I put myself into the middle, if nothing else?
I mean, that's good. It's more so that you... It's a framing thing that I like to pay attention to, that you're looking into the shot.
Ah, you see.
It's me old school media training kicking in, saying you don't want to be looking like, if I look that way, I'm looking off the screen into the very, very small
I mean,
space.
to be fair, you do currently have the chat right there, so it's
I
not a
have the
bad place
chat.
to look.
I have the chat here. Anyway, we're going to play the Epic playlist and get some music going in the background. And we're going to do some world building discussions. So, how to start this stream is going to be a weird one. Ben has resubscribed.
No kidding.
It is Ben again, has resubscribed for 12 months. That's a whole year. Just building worlds. It's easy. Any god can do it. Because of you two, we're close to a subtrain. So if people get some subtrain action going, subs, gift subs, use your bits now, we can start a subtrain and get some rewards for subbing.
Hey. We only need one more. Only one more. We can do that. Must be able to do it. Someone do that.
So, what is world building? I don't know how basic to start this.
I'd probably say at very least, probably description as to in what context. I mean, we're not literally going to start doing a massive science here.
Well,
I don't have the chemicals for that.
In the beginning, basically, when you are writing a story, a fantasy story, or you are wanting to play a fantasy or play a role-playing game, you need to have a world to set it in. And as I said, you could be writing a story for book purposes, for movie purposes, for TV show purposes. You could be writing a video game, a role-playing game. Whatever, you need to have what is typically referred to as internal consistency. And that is the same, like, when the thing happens, the same thing happens every time.
Yep.
That makes sense to people, right? Like,
and it makes sense to me here, and I think I'm the only person who can respond for everyone else.
Good. So, typically, if you see the fact that Ben and I both have drinks containers, you would imagine that we both have drink with them. Mine obviously says evil genius on it because I'm an evil genius.
Mine, though it's very hard to tell, has the bumbling monk written on it. But it was gifted to me by John.
But you know what that means, as sort of picking up a mug and taking a drink from it. You know what that means because you've seen other people do it. It's a shorthand. It's a
logic of the world. Yeah.
It's a logic of the world, and we're going to go and look at writing some of that logic for a different world where the same rules don't necessarily apply as our world, but we want the same rules to apply to that world at all times.
Of course.
And so what we are going to look at tonight, at the very least, we might come back and do others of these, either further expanding this world, or I've got a world building guidebook here that features futuristic, that features steam/cyberpunk, that features, I can't remember what the other one is. I think it's like Western.
And Western is certainly another interesting side of things.
Oh, horror. Yeah,
horror,
so fantasy,
horror.
sci-fi, horror, X-punk, and just the neutral setting. Just these ones apply to all of them. And so we might do something with a sci-fi world. We might come back and do something in a horror setting, so that you guys get some ideas of how world building happens and what questions you might need to ask if you're writing a sci-fi game or a horror game or a punk game.
And the other side of things, if you have any questions as well, throw them in.
Yes.
Might be able to do something along those lines as well. We could always do a Q&A one of these if this takes off.
Yeah. So at the moment, obviously, Pretzel Rocks is also going to be telling you what music is playing if you want to hear. At the moment, we've got some big giant circles, which I'm a big fan of.
Nice.
So we're gonna start tonight, and tonight's stream we're going to be looking at the world of Tamrinor, which is a fantasy world based on the adventures of three little characters that started off as the final boss fight logo. So
they were here before me, and I'm jealous.
the only person who's still in final boss fight for longer than them is me. Not even Sean outdates our logo.
Oh wow. I need to go back in time and change that.
Don't. You'll create a paradox. It won't go well. Yeah. We know that internal consistency of sci-fi. So in the world, we've done a little bit of world building in it, in that there have been some stories written about the characters, and we know some details. So I've put a brief primer down about the races that exist in the world to begin with, and we're going to look at some questions, and Ben and I are going to talk back and forth about them and put down some more information about the world, and with the intention that hopefully when we are completely finished and happy with this, possibly not in this stream alone, we'll have sort of a story bible that people can refer to say, this is how the world of Tamrinor works. Please let me know if the music is too loud in the stream, if anybody's out there and can hear me well enough to be able to tell that is what I am saying. Because this is a little bit more overpowering than the other music I had on Pretzel recently.
One moment. If you want to just hold your voice for a second, I'll listen in.
Okay, I'm going to just keep talking about stuff. So, at the moment, we've got three heroic races. We have the humans, who are basically humans. You know how that works. They do have access to magic. We know that they have access to magic through channeling a divinity. They may have access to other magic in other ways. We have...
Popping back in quickly, you sound alright.
Excellent.
Before you're worrying that you're not coming across it, you sound alright.
We have the Avians, who are bird-like people. They largely look, in terms of features, the same as humans, with the rather large distraction of very large feathery wings. But these wings can be tucked away and completely hidden, either by tucking them inside travelling clothes, or through use of magic. I'm not sure on that one, whether it's sort of a illusory spell that just covers the wings when they don't want them shown, or they sort of fold them up like Angel does in that X-Men film.
I mean, to be fair, when it comes down to that's an interesting topic which we can immediately start off on. Because if it's an illusionary spell, it opens up the possibility that they'll accidentally knock into something every now and again. It adds something which they have to be wary of. Whereas if it's something where it effectively compacts so far down, because you take a look at the one which he did, that Angel had.
It's not comfortable in that.
Too far down, really. It didn't make any sense for it to do that. So it almost seems like it'd be more like something effectively folding in, almost angelic, folding into the body itself, into a space which really it shouldn't be able to. But
I think possibly we go, in terms of that then, I think the magic route.
I think it works a bit better, and it also opens up a possible novelty for the sake of playing an Avian, which is trying to make sure that no one actually comes into your wing space area.
Well, the other thing that I question is, it doesn't necessarily have to be illusory magic that makes the wings disappear. It could be transmutation magic that...
That's a valid point. I'm going along when it comes down to thinking going D&D, a classic one which we can all... well, majority of us will probably be able to have a good idea about. I'll say all and just say, no, you all know.
Everybody knows.
Yeah, exactly. But ended up thinking when it comes down to there are some races which are inherently magical to particular spells and or particular uses. So in which case it could make absolute sense that this is just something they know inherently how to do, even if it is just for their wings. As you say, a transmutational spell which just makes it disappear effectively. Or at least becomes so small that it hides away.
One thing that, like, in my head, there's a lot of stuff.
Don't worry, that's pretty much preaching to the choir.
Yeah, really, that's why we're all here.
Yeah, that's true.
In Good Omens, which I'm sure that a lot of people now have been exposed to through the work of Neil Gaiman bringing it to Amazon recently, but it's also a book. I don't know if you've read the book, Ben, or seen the show, or been exposed to it either way.
I'm in a terrible position where, when it comes down to it, I've decided that I will not watch the show until I've read the book. Started reading the book, and then got distracted by work and other things which really don't matter. And sort of got a bit limited in that respect, which is a bit of a shame, to be honest.
This is fair.
But when it comes down to it, I have read enough into it, if nothing else, for the sake of the concept of the... Well, mind you, once again, it's that whole concept of the angelic being able to effectively transform. Never really changing their persona, never changing how they look, but transforming into a more humanoid shape rather than angelic.
So,
or demonic in some cases as well.
For avoidance of spoiler purposes, I will vaguely describe the scene that happens towards the end of the book and how I always pictured it in my head when I read the book. Towards the end of the book, Aziraphale and Crowley have realized that they need to work together. And they confront a big bad guy. And to do this, they unveil their full angelic and or demonic selves and unfurl their wings, which for most of the book aren't there. Now, I always pictured this, that Aziraphale is described as having a long brown coat, and Crowley has a long leathery coat. And I always pictured that as they unfurled their wings, literally their coats opened and split and unfurled into the wings. Not that the wings were underneath or inside, that they actually were the coat. And it sort of...
That does make a lot of sense.
Unfurled, magically just became from long brown coat or long black leathery coat into demonic or angelic wings.
That's what I said. That makes a lot of sense, actually.
So I think that's the way we're going.
So effectively, yes, it is a form of illusionary magic, but it's not something where it's an illusion where it sort of disappears off. It just looks like it's become something else instead. Almost like a camouflage technique instead of a full-on magical effect. Because let's face it, if you place it down as it's a full-on magical effect, the big question which comes afterwards is, well, why can't they do that to other things? Whereas if it's more magic which is inherent to just camouflage themselves, at least you've answered that already.
So if we say that they can hide their wings by turning them into something akin to a coat or a cloak until they're needed.
That sounds good to me.
I also really...
I
also really liked the way in Gargoyles, the Disney show, Goliath used to wrap his wings around himself like a cloak.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, you even got it in another example, which would be Jeepers Creepers.
Yep.
Taking a very darker twist, but then again, once again, in world building, you're going to have a darker version of pretty much anything you come up with.
Yeah, we'll get down to that in a minute.
Oh yes, of course. But you end up thinking about that is along the same sort of lines, really. I mean, the other side of it, you say that as well with the concept of the Raptors. One thing which I always like to play with is the concept that there isn't. Generally, there's good guys, bad guys, like you've got written down there.
Yes.
But the other side of things is that that's not necessarily black and white. And it doesn't usually hold. There's always going to be an example which gets out of that and twists around. I like to play with that as an idea. But yes, of course, as you say, you got the Raptors a bit further down. Anyway, we'll continue.
So the Avians tend to be, or are, a long-lived race. And they mostly hold by sort of... They're the Lord of the Rings elves. They hold by tradition. They have large monastery-styled libraries that, as I've mentioned here, they tend to live in mountainous areas where it is difficult for other races to get to because screw you, we're bird people.
To be fair, I can see that one going along quite nicely, even sort of going so far as to say they're probably... I know you had the wild ones there, which we'll come to in just a second, obviously.
Yes.
But effectively, the Avians being almost like an offshoot of the wild ones and living with the old ways, the nature and such forth. So even when it comes down to... We haven't got into how they might live, how their day-to-day side of things goes by. Obviously, once again, we're starting off simple and moving, which is effectively what world building is. But when you say that they're kind of elvish, I can see them in my mind as living, as you say, in the mountainous and difficult terrain, the place where you wouldn't expect other people. And when it comes down to say, making a home or something like that, they literally do nothing more than they need to make a new home. So let's say, for example, using a tree. Let's say in the mountains they've got these huge trees, mountainous trees, literally clawing away, making enough room that they can actually get in, and everything which is taken is reused. So even down to the sawdust, which gets transformed and made into the paper, which is the books, which holds their information and holds their knowledge. That's the sort of creature, that's the sort of race I see when you talk about these Avians. It just feels right with them.
I think that in terms of houses, but they also have... I get the feeling they have a very ornate library.
Oh no, I'd agree.
We have...
Because once again, they feel like a very intellectual base. That is effectively... their temple is their library.
Yes.
And it is important, and there's a reason why they hold importance to it. And that's because knowledge is the key part, and thus they will hold on and make sure, and the written word is holy text regardless of what it is, so long as it holds importance.
So in the...
And immediately I'm getting it Lost Air. I'm getting the Lost Airbender vibes when it came down to the vast library and that.
So in terms of the main characters that we know of the Avian race, the only Avian that has any real detail is Eric the Cleric. Who, one, doesn't like being called Eric the Cleric. He has a full name, like, he has a full name that is Even Eye, Runewind, Ironheart, something beginning with C, but everybody just calls him Eric.
I like that.
And
like
he
that
doesn't understand why. He doesn't get it. And just goes along with it because everybody else seems to find it easier. But it's not respecting his full name. And he is the sort of person, along the same lines as Sir Gunter D. Parker of the Dark Star was. He is very much that same... I have this full name and long title, and I will introduce myself with all of it.
Yes, once again, it's that whole thing of, no, my name isn't shortened, it isn't a nickname or anything like that. The name is important, and that is a good element to sort of throw in as well for a race where the name has importance because of what context it holds within it. Kind of thinking back to more like Lord of the Rings when it comes down to that, you might try to get away with, no, I am not this, I am Strider, but your name is important to someone. Even if it might not be yourself, it is important. And especially from a race which is all about holding on to information, that would be a lot more important as well. It is certainly something which you would absolutely cling to as much as you'll possibly be able to. Because once it is your history, it is your own backstory. It makes perfect sense to me that you would hold on as best you can to whatever names are thrown around.
So
and
much,
yes, as you say, introducing yourself would be the full name.
Much along those lines, there are two named weapons that we know of in Tamrinor at the moment. And one of them is Greenfallow, the hammer that Eric the Cleric wields. And it is a large, two-handed battle hammer.
Okay.
I don't know if it has any other magical properties. It probably does.
Once again, it's something which we can place down to. For the sake of nothing else, when it comes down to, at very least, the three main ones and the history which you've got already for the sake of these characters, which were, as you say, effectively ones which were created effectively out of necessity and then has been elaborated over time.
Yes.
They are effectively heroes of legend. And yes, when it comes down to, you might not have thought so much about the actual properties of the magical hammer held and wielded by Eric the Cleric. And yet, when it comes down to it, it's something which, once again, we can elaborate on and pump up and build onto it. Once again, the whole element of world building is that it doesn't matter where your seed starts, it's just building from it and slowly elaborating.
Yes.
It's kind of like that whole Minecraft side of things. You never really start off with a village, you start off with a house, and then you slowly build and create a...
You build the next thing, and then you build the next thing.
I was just thinking to myself, this is what I do. I build a house, and then I build a place to work, I build a storage unit, and I build a... But you start somewhere, and it doesn't matter where you start, you just gotta build from wherever that comes from. And these bits of information are... well, an excellent way of how this begins and slowly grows.
Yes. I am also just looking back through my phone for the pictures that were drawn some years ago. Some years ago that I can't remember how many years ago. There it is. For the name of the other named weapon.
Ah, I see.
Which was Suntide, which is a magical staff wielded by Mira the Mage.
For the sake of holding on, more for the sake of my benefit more than anything else, could you put into brackets which race Eric the Cleric was and which race Mira was?
So Mira is a human.
What is? Okay.
And Eric the Cleric is an Avian. That is not how you spell Avian. That is how you spell Avian. So, also for the stream purposes, you can't see that. Cool. Never mind. It gets green screened out.
If there's a chance that maybe you could sort of flag it up at one point.
I'll share it when we share this. We will share this document later. We're spending a lot more time going through the notes than I thought we would, but we'll get to some answering of questions and writing new stuff in a moment.
Of course.
The last of the mostly good guy races. Now, the wild ones are a bit of a 50-50. They aren't all good. Humans and the Avians tend to be good for the sake of they're over there and they don't really mess with anybody else.
Okay.
Humans are humans, and you know, they do their thing. The wild ones have the potential to be very good or very bad. They are mammalian humanoids, ranging from... I've put dogs and cats and realised that that's very similar in terms of scope. But as far as I remember, they can be pretty much any mammal, but in a humanoid version. And they are...
That makes a bit more sense, but yeah, basically, effectively any mammal of sorts. Because that even opens up to the seafaring as well, so...
Yeah.
Because obviously there are the sea mammals, which would have their own bit underneath the ocean as well. As you say, dogs and cats, they're quick, they're easy, but the fact of the matter, pretty much any mammal being able to turn and effectively become half and half, especially if their characteristics carry on through as well.
They do. So, for instance, with Tack, who is the main character of the old FBF logo, and this guy that's still down on the desk in the stream, and is also in the stream startup screen. Tack is a dog-like wild one. And the original, or the storyline that we had for Tack, is that a terrible, horrible warlord suddenly went missing. And he was about to lead a horrible army of wild ones against the world of the humans. And before he could, he disappeared and no one knows where he went. But he probably is Tak.
Gotcha.
He may not be.
I kind of like that as a little play around as well, to be honest. That whole, once again, how would you know? Times have changed and all this
He
stuff.
doesn't
Unless
know.
he is going around and telling everyone. But if it's a story about him and he doesn't know, then how would anyone know? He could be, he might not be. But then again, at least the concept of legend as well, which sort of just rides behind it.
Yeah. But he is vicious when he needs to be. He's wild when he needs to be. But also, because he's a dog, he's loyal. And a little bit stupid sometimes. But he is loyal to his friends. And you know, he follows his party around and protects Mira and Eric when the going gets tough. He's got their back as soon as they befriend him and, you know, they prove themselves worthy of needing his protection.
What's good, yeah. I like that as an idea as well, the whole thing of making those kind of judgments along the line as well. It's not the sort of thing which you would just randomly come across, would it?
No. In the lore, we don't know yet if the Wild Ones have any connection to magic.
Yeah.
They don't tend to be intellectual. They tend to go for martial over intellectual from what we have seen. Obviously, that doesn't mean there aren't intellectual wild ones. And it could be that there are some of the mammals that are.
Going along with that, I mean, I like the concept almost giving a bit of homage to Hitchhiker's Guide, where something you could throw in for the sake of the ones which are a lot more on the intellectual side you don't tend to see because they're not a part of the land. They are the dolphins of the sea that have created effectively Atlantis. And it's another version of the Avians and their version of their intellect.
I'm now just picturing, and I've been picturing it for a little while, just this one sloth wizard who's just very slowly plodding along with the book. And like very much like Flash from Zootopia.
Yeah.
I'll be right there. I have a spell for this. Let me just find it.
I could just imagine. And feel free to shoot this down quicker than anything else, but there is one sloth wizard. One in particular who has been casting a very particular spell, which for the average probably wouldn't take as long, but this person has been casting, and probably coming up to about a year's worth of time now. Has been protected by other mammals and such, and trying to be kept as much in silence and in secrecy as possible, because this spell could potentially save everything. But it takes so long for this wizard to actually...
This one poor sloth wizard.
Yeah. They're literally talking to the point of entish speed of talk, trying to cast a spell to save everything. And no one knows about it.
I like the idea, Will. I like it. So, in terms of the less heroic races, there are two that we know of in the world at the moment. I mean, obviously, as I've said, the humans and the wild folk can tend towards being nasty peoples.
Of course.
That's how people is.
Exactly. There's always that chance that you're going to be able to flip from one side to the other. But the ones who seem a bit more on that side of the spectrum rather than...
This Gygaxian and the spawn of the Gygaxian are always evil. Like, while there might be good races and bad races, the Gygaxian is just bad. And all of his spawn are evil. The Gygaxian is the main source of evil in the world. He is evil incarnate. If you want the BBEG, he is it. You know, if he gets out, the world ends. That's sort of the bad.
I do love that as a concept as well, that effectively it's more the influence which manages to get through. It's never really Gygaxian. Just for the sake that if Gygaxian does get out, we're talking almost Tarrasque levels of...
Yeah, we're talking like...
End of world.
The Tarrasque gets out. We're talking Ganondorf takes over Hyrule for years and years and years. That level of bad. You know, the Gygaxian may not immediately end the world. Like, that's not necessarily what he wants. He possibly wants to rule it. We've not really asked. Nobody really knows. We just know that it's bad. And therefore we don't really want it.
I could just imagine there's going to be a cult to the Gygaxian. It's not that bad, honestly.
He's just misunderstood.
He just wants world peace under his rule exactly how he wants it.
And then we also have the Raptors. And now the Raptors came up in another stream we did where we were making Tamrinor in a different world building system. And I liked this idea, and I think we mentioned in there that there were dragons and other things like that. So there are probably dragons out there as well that really we haven't noted here, but I mean, it's fantasy, so of course there are dragons. You can't go wrong with a dragon.
This is more just the very bare-bone basics of how to start, with everything which has been fully confirmed. It's not to say that there aren't other things which will come into this and offshoots that come afterwards. This is literally just from...
This is the start.
Speed. It's the starting point. And you grow.
So the Raptors are an evil race, similar to the Avians, but more around the birds of prey.
Okay.
And so they are angular, and I always picture them as like taller and thinner for some reason. But I guess they also, like, there should be ones that are just muscly birdmen.
Yes.
Because, like, if you're talking an eagle or a hawk, those are big, muscular bird people. If you're talking a vulture, that's the thin, you know, angular, evil-looking, sharp.
I mix over to... Oh, I'm losing bits of rates and all that other... But to try and throw it into sort of almost like a Lord of the Rings sort of vibe, we're almost talking like Uruk-hai versus the Orc.
Yes.
Both come down the same trend, but one is physically, obviously, a lot more empowering and standing and really sort of showing off what on earth they are.
Yeah.
Whereas the other one just seems to be almost like the bog standard bottom level version instead. And to be fair, I think that works out quite nicely. Because once again, it gives a different element of how they go about their deeds. Where if you are spindly, you're going to have to be a lot more conniving. If you are physically prone, you can effectively go in and just destroy everything. I am losing bitrate with that a lot. I carry on losing bits.
It'll work itself out.
Oh, it will. We know it will. It's gone through many a time.
If anyone in the chat wants to throw some bits at Ben, that'd be great. we could use them right now, apparently.
It certainly seems that way.
So now, having spent the stream so far discussing what notes I do have, let's make some new ones, sort of. So I've got a series of 20 questions. We'll go through some of them. I'm not promising we're going to get to all 20, because apparently Ben and I like to talk a lot. And we have ideas.
But let's face it, there's no denying
We
that.
knew this going in. That's why I wanted Ben here. So, I'm going to start, because the first question is magic present in the world? And the answer is
pretty much
yes.
confirmed that, yes.
But also, if it is, how common is it?
Now, that is a more important question to ask.
don't-
Obviously, we've already pretty much said with the Avians, there's an element of it which is certainly common. But as for the sake of actual casting and almost, we're talking more wizard level.
We're talking wizard level. I think it's not hugely common.
I would think that it would make more sense when it's not hugely common. Otherwise, I think the wizards would basically be running everything.
Yeah, I think it's sort of... It may not even be standard D&D level common. It's like a little bit less than that. Like, people know that there's magic.
Yes.
But
actually coming across a person who casts it isn't a day-to-day thing.
But it's an unusual thing. You might see it in your lifetime, but you'll be telling people about it for a little while.
Oh, yeah. And I'd probably place on the other side of things, but with that in mind, it's also something which isn't exactly shouted off the rooftops when you have it. It's not that you hold it entirely in secret, but it's not something you exploit. Because though there are people that will be talking about it and are highly impressed by it, there are also going to be those who highly fear it. I would place it, especially those who depend entirely upon their strength, would be certainly a bit more prone to fearing that rather than applauding it. In which case, you might be hunted for the sake of being able to use magic. After all, when it comes down to it, it's a lot of power that you can absolutely have control and be able to twist around.
Yeah.
And when you think about magic, it effectively changes the world. It can very much change the world in an element that just a person with charisma or strength can never do.
So, from what has been discussed in backstories and things, we know that Mira the Mage, whose name I think I've spelled correctly, but I may get it wrong because I tend to, and I will check and spell correct it. I'm going to check now. We know that she has gone to a location that is out there, that is not easily accessible, with the intention of learning magics. And that all of the people there are able to do spells.
Because that would be one thing which I would certainly throw down, is that whole aspect that there would be a hidden culture who can. And certainly, heck, we're almost getting along the lines of Hogwarts here now, but
it was more it was more a divinity.
I see.
Than necessarily a
in which case, another reason why you wouldn't flaunt it. It's not a gift from the gods isn't something which should be flaunted. It should be cherished, it should be used, it should be nurtured, but never flaunted.
I did have the H and the Y the wrong way round. Unless I had it the wrong way round in that particular book, but I don't think I posted to the website the wrong spelling ever. So basically, yeah, she went to a offshore temple, a sort of golden temple to a golden goddess. And just before she left there, the golden goddess went missing and hasn't been seen since. But may definitely, possibly not have something to do with Suntide, the magical staff that Mira wields. And may not actually be inhabiting Mira's form. Possibly.
Interesting.
But the golden goddess is missing, and Mira, the girl with blonde hair and great magical powers, is now walking the world. Something that the golden goddess was unable to do.
I must admit, going along with that as an idea, I come back to an idea which came from, which was put forward, and apparently was an original concept of the road to El Dorado.
Right.
Which is that in the road to El Dorado, there seems to be actual divinity in play at one point in it, without trying to give away any spoilers or anything like that, but there seems to be an actual point. There are two novel characters which have been thrown in, one which is a bit more active than the other, which is an armadillo and a butterfly.
Right.
And so the theory goes, and apparently it was originally there, though how they deleted the scene, I don't know whether they did, is that the armadillo and the butterfly are actually the gods who wanted to experience life and experience how the others lived and such, but without being a part of them, so never really interfering. Then seeing that these ones have come down and taken their place and decided to help them. I can see that as an idea being effectively played through in this manner. Once again, as you say, mysteriously disappears, and then happens to be a person who goes around with similar powers, maybe not to the same degree, but powers nonetheless.
Yes.
Just for the sake of a person being able to, or God being able to experience life in a lower form. I really am glitching out like nobody's at the moment, aren't I? There's a problem with the Matrix. There's a problem with the Matrix.
Don't point it out, the agents will come.
Yeah.
Now we know that Mira herself was a person who went there, and that she had a life up to that point, but it is possible that the goddess is either in the staff or somehow piggybacking in Mira.
Yeah.
So,
I suppose you end up with a similar experience, don't you?
Pretty much. So question 2 is a little bit more tricky.
Right.
Because it requires us to think specifically about one event in the world's history.
Okay.
So question 2 in this book... For anybody who... I can't remember if I've mentioned what the book is or not, but it is The Ultimate RPG Game Master's World Building Guide by James D'Amato. And I would recommend his books because they are brilliant.
Yep. I must admit, I do have his book on just how to RPG in general.
I have all 3 of his books. This is the 3rd one. This is How to World. He's also done How to Person and How to just generally do things.
Yep.
Sure
there'll be some future editions added in at one point.
So, question 2. What major event in the world's history is remembered largely inaccurately?
Ooh. And generally, when it comes down to it, the easy option would always be to say a particular war.
That makes sense.
Wars over time usually are twisted, though I would be tempted to throw in for other aspects. So, though war would certainly be one, and let's face it, we could throw in a few of those which have been inaccurately documented over time because the victor tells the story, which is the real trick when it comes down to any war.
True, true.
I would be tempted to throw in for other elements which have been
So
twisted over time.
What would you say is something that isn't a war? Because while there definitely have been wars in this world,
the quickest and easiest thing which I can place down is between what we have marked down as the good guys. Would there have been bias between one or another? So, for example, let's say that the Avians, not believing they were doing anything maliciously, basically brought in the wild ones to work.
yes,
They fed them, they housed them, they looked after them in their mind. Whereas, from the wild ones' perspective, it was slavery. So you end up with two different stories. It's not to say that one of them is incorrect, but it's more two stories taking a look at the same thing because it wasn't really fully understood. So the wild ones have taken that it was a slavery, and thus these ones in particular, it might not even be the entire lot, but maybe a particular region, at very least.
yeah.
But there is now a massive distrust on the Avians because they helped build their particular libraries, their monuments to knowledge. And yet, in their mind, even though they were housed and such forth, it was in such demeaning manner that it was more slavery and they were pets to be used rather than
Or
being
even
treated as individuals.
they were housed in the Avians' manner, which isn't to the liking necessarily of the
Exactly.
wild ones. We've discussed that the wild one, the Avians have very simple housing.
Indeed.
So if
And they would believe that when it came down to it, that the Avians, because let's place it down that it was the building of the actual library.
Yes.
Because this seems like a nice one to play with. So the library is incredibly elaborate, specialized. It is delicate in design down to the finest of details because it is what is the only thing which is taking it to be important. Whereas the homes of the Avians aren't. So the interpretation would be that because they're in houses which appear to be squalor in comparison to what they're building, that they are being mistreated. And it is a hard belief for them to get past because though they might be even shown the houses which the Avians actually stay in, they would just end up believing, no, these are the huts which you had us stay in. You're just trying to make us think that this is so much better than it actually is.
So I've just gone back to one of the books that we wrote in 2017.
Okay.
This was the second chapter of the Tamrinor Chronicles, which was the first introduction from Eric. And this was written from the first-person perspective of Eric the Cleric, an Avian, who at the time apparently we weren't calling Avians, we had literally just called the Raptors.
Ah.
But that
once again, things adapt over time, don't they?
That's not their race's name. The true name of our race is unpronounceable by your uncultured tongue. But I digress. We are, as I'm sure you're aware, a race of scholars. Our libraries hold the sum total of all knowledge in the land. We painstakingly maintain and reproduce these books so that nothing is lost. Our towers reach high into the sky, and on a clear day you can see many of us swooping between the spires at the very top. No, it isn't all that hot. I mean, I know we are in a dry, arid climate, and we wear these robes, but really you don't notice. I'm digressing again. My name is Evenai Runewood Ironheart Cloudhand. I am the keeper of the scriptures of the third wing of the Ember Wolf Library, the fourth in line to the lineage of the head cleric, Mervyn Waterhelm, and keeper of the sacred hammer Greenfellow. I am also a follower of the teachings of Raiki of the Antari. I am approximately
Nice
500. I'm approximately 500 of your years old.
I like the use of your years as well. That's another little element which sort of throws in. Especially for the sake of misunderstandings, potentially.
Would it surprise you to learn that I am still considered a youth by the standards of my race? I have been to many places and seen many things, most of which you cannot even begin to imagine. You see, I am what we call a questor. For the majority of us, a life led in contemplation of knowledge is enough. Spending our years in the high eyries of Skyleth, surrounded by memories of when this land, capital L, was still being formed. We have writings dating back to the times when the three gods formed this world, raising mountains and planting forests, and many of us spent our time lost in these records. But for some of us, just reading about things isn't enough. For some of us want to get out there and experience them for ourselves. They call us questers because we go on quests.
Okay.
Oh, so also, I'm remembering as I read this,
Okay.
the Golden City of Golian is the temple that Mira had been to.
Okay.
And Raiki of the Antari as the Golden Goddess. She brought enlightenment to the wild ones in the east.
Interesting.
I watched as the humans came to Golian to create peace between themselves and the Antari, who are the godlike race. I watched as the young race spread out across the east and south of the lands. I even watched as Lotak the Terrible led his crusade on his misguided venture to conquer the lands of the Antari. No, I don't know what happened at the end of that particular incident. I don't know what happened to Reiki or to Lotak. I'm not sure I want to.
Interesting. And another one for the sake of a misunderstood history. You could certainly go back to the gods themselves there. Because you made a mention on the three gods.
Yes.
Now, one thing which I always like to play around with is a misunderstanding of obviously true godly power and such forth, and how they come down and appear, and some would show themselves, some wouldn't. Whether there is more than meets the eye when it comes down to just the three gods. It's not to say that they're not all active or not doing their own thing, but there might be more there than it has been noticed. But that could play into many different storylines, and rather than being something which could be quickly answered, I think that's something which would take a lot of thought. Because I'm presuming then they are the high gods, these three gods?
Yes, I believe that was the intention, is that there were three high gods and then sort of I say a race, like a group. The Antari were not one, but not many.
Okay.
That were sort of much more connected to everything than the humans or any of the other races. So actually I guess they should probably go in the list of races in the world.
It certainly would be a good one, I would say.
Oh, and the Lotak the Terrible that is mentioned in that section I just read turns into Tak the Terrible, or Tak Tanath.
Okay.
So what do we what do we think that we put down for? Currently, we want a thing. I like the idea that the Wild Ones misunderstood.
I think that misunderstanding is always an interesting aspect because it throws in for conflict and potential change over time, but it's one of those bits where it's, as well as that, pretty much understandable misunderstandings. Because it's just different cultures. Once again, you end up thinking about when people started venturing forth around the globe, there were many a different thing that happened, and there were many a misunderstanding which happened from it. I'm sure there'll be many and more, and that was literally just the one which sort of popped into the head to begin with. The other temptation I'd be to throw in is effectively almost a lost civilization which no one really has claim to or puts a claim to. It's just something which was there, disappeared, and no one remembers because time has passed. Thinking almost along the lines of the Lost Aztecs and stuff like that. Because once again, there's one element of having a history which is remembered in different manners, but having a history which is not remembered at all throws in a whole different element to play with.
Just having ruins, but nothing.
Even if it's ruins to, once again, for the sake that there are deities, even having it to one where it doesn't even seem to line up to one of the deities which is known. Which once again could come down to that civilization having a misunderstanding. And fully throwing down its belief and maybe even being protected for a time by the god which they thought they were going to, but was actually something else. But was not able to sustain itself for whatever reason, whether maybe they found a discovery which actually wiped them off instead. There are a few ways that can play around. I've always had a fun point of having a lost civilization of one kind or another, just for the sake that there's a lot of mystery there, and it can go in a multitude of different ways. And it all comes down to, well, it can't be ours, or it can't be theirs, it can't be there, but if it's none of ours, whose is it? God knows that the Avians would love it.
I don't know, the Avians would either love it or absolutely hate it.
Well, it's one of those things, I think there's two ways. It's either the ones who want to adventure to try and figure out what on earth it is, or the ones who want to try and disband or almost get rid of it. Which could lead to a very interesting plot of effectively these ones want to wipe it off the wipe it off. I was going to say the Earth is on. The Earth is
Tamrinor.
Tamrinor. Want to wipe it completely away from Tamrinor, so that it is a completely forgotten history. Obviously, it doesn't matter. Otherwise, it would be in their grand library. And the other one's saying, no, this is a forgotten history because we haven't actually looked in and documented. So we should document and figure out, because there could be so much more to learn from it. The two very different versions of wanting and controlling knowledge.
Yes.
Which certainly fits in very nicely with the avian ideology.
Okay.
Well, at least as far as I've understood it.
So, question 3. What happens to people when they die? You know, little questions.
Oh, yeah.
Is there an afterlife?
And that in itself is a very interesting question, because the other side is... Well, okay, let's go with the very first question, because really that can be split into two. Is there an afterlife? So, to put that into the easiest way to begin with, I would actually say there's another question hidden in there. in your world, is there such a thing as specters or ghosts? Entities that used to have a body but don't anymore.
I'm trying to remember if we've mentioned them anywhere in anything that's been written so far. I don't think we have.
And I believe that there would always be a concept of people that would believe that there is anyway, but as to whether or not we actually physically...
Whether there actually are.
Exactly. Now, the reason I placed that one down first is because if you do, there's an afterlife. And if there's an afterlife, there would either be thousands of ghosts, which we can absolutely immediately discredit. There are not thousands of ghosts, otherwise it would have been something which would have been easily documented and been around. Which means they would have to go somewhere.
Yes.
So, with that in mind, with the world which we're generating here, considering this is more your world than anybody else's, do you think there would be actual ghosts? Actual specters, actual ghouls?
I'm wondering if the reason that there aren't thousands of them is that that specters and ghouls only happen if someone has been corrupted by the Gygaxian and die while still corrupted.
Ah, so an element of you gets caught and stays behind.
You can't... I mean, I guess that also answers the next one of you can't go to the next place because I've still got you here and you're still going.
In which case, we've already answered the first question, which is there is an afterlife.
Yes.
So that one is a guarantee. There is an afterlife. The next part, and I've placed in there as well, is that, okay, so we have guaranteed there is an afterlife. Is there any way for a person from life to be able to actually communicate with the afterlife? In which case, it could end up being the biggest mystery of it all. No one really knows what goes on the other side. And in fact, it becomes more belief system than anything. You'll never know until you actually go, but we believe it's this, and they believe it's that. And there are some people that claim they have been to the other side and have come back, because of course there's people who claim they've been to the other side and come back. I mean, obviously we'll place in our own what actually happens.
I mean, what we know, or one thing we know, is that Reiki of the Antari dealt with healing magic.
Okay.
And taught healing magic to people. So it could be that the Antari that we know from what I've just written down in the notes, there aren't many. There could be, like, say about 9 or so that teach each different school of magic.
That would make sense. But have passed on the information down. I mean, certainly rings to a nice little feel of it all.
Because actually, if I'm pulling back to this this story that I have written here, Eric mentions, I'm also a follower of the teachings of Reiki of the Antari, and then later on in it, I went to the Golden City of Golian, I met with a fabled Reiki of the Antari, learned many things. This is my third quest. I haven't got a destination in mind. This time I'm happy just to wander the land and see the events as they happen. I've picked up a few healing skills, and Reiki showed me some of the Antari healing arts, so I'm always able to get by.
And to be fair, when it comes down to it, that opens up to another question. Is the magic effectively a gift from the Antari? So, obviously we know it can be something which can be learnt, otherwise you wouldn't have learnt it from another race, another idea. So we know it's learnt. Now, considering it's an information which is beyond the majority of people, which is another thing which we've established, if it was only from the Antari and they pass it down and only those who have a particular aptitude can actually master it, it would certainly make sense that the Antari are the ones who have gifted this magic.
Yes. I like the idea that the Antari were the originators. But that people can learn it. It might take a couple of years.
Oh yeah,
it might take a
particularly gifted. It might take you a short period of time. If you are not gifted at all, it could take you forever.
Yeah,
but the potential is technically there.
I really like that sort of thing with. I don't know if you ever watched the original Dragon Ball, but
yeah, well, a bit of it I've been trying to get into because I've got friends who very much watch it all.
But have you ever seen the origin of Master Roshi learning the Kamehameha?
Oh.
And showing Goku, Son Goku, the Kamehameha wave.
Yes, I do remember that.
Master Roshi spent 50 years learning how to do this, and Goku watched him do it once and learned it.
Immediately learned.
So I kind of like the idea that if you are specifically skilled, oh, that's how you do it.
Yeah. Exactly. It's just inherent. You just need to be able to snap those concepts together.
It makes
sense.
Whereas
there's some which would just take so much longer just to figure out the simplest part of it. Once again, it's that whole element of whether your brain can actually figure out how that goes together. I do like that as well. Yeah, when it comes down to it takes its time, yeah. I have a tendency to think that there might be a particular Antari of sorts, then, which might be more of a master of necromancy.
Yes.
And it sounds like a negative. It sounds like it should be a negative. Whereas really it's more the caretaker of those who have passed.
Very much the original Hades.
Exactly.
You know, not this modern Hades where Hades is something.
Not Disney Hades, not the terrible Hades, the Hades as it was originally written.
As much as I love the Disney Hades, like...
Oh, yeah, don't get me wrong. I love the way it was presented, I love it for the sake of the story. But for the sake of...
But that ain't Hades.
No, exactly. We're talking like Thanatos as well. It's that whole element of, no, it's looking after. And the concept of believing in the honourable death and stuff like that, and that belief, and that sort of story. Well, once again, it's a bit like when it comes down to the Grim Reaper. There's such a negative press behind because, once again, it comes with death, the most terrible thing that could possibly happen.
I also just looked across at the music that's playing right now, and we're on The Whisperer in the Dark, which is rather an epic, sort of slow, evil-ish tune as we're discussing necromancy.
It always seems like it was destined, really, doesn't it?
I mean, I in case it's not come up, and I'm fairly certain it should have by this point, I'm a huge Terry Pratchett fan, and I love the way that he does death. As not evil, but the equalizer.
Oh, I will say for the sake of it, just for the sake, I know that it is literally over my shoulder at the moment. You can see the bag. For the sake, I've been slowly getting into Terry Pratchett. I'm sorry for the tangent, but that bag is full of Terry Pratchett books, which I found at a charity shop, which was selling them. Oh yeah, you can have a few of these ones. No, I'll buy them all.
What ones have you been reading?
Well, I've been trying to go through in order.
An interesting way of reading the Discworld.
I have been told. But yeah, trying to go by the order which is literally in there, and it is one of those things where I love the style of writing. And the worst part is realizing that actually I've seen a couple of these stories. Okay, I prefer to be able to read them to actually get my own vision of them. Like, for instance, the one which I'm waiting to get to is the postal one.
Going postal, yes.
Yeah.
That's going to take you some time to get to. That's one of the later ones.
Ah. Fair enough.
If you're reading through them in order, which they'll get better as you go.
That's the thing which I've been told, and it's a case of
he definitely gets
some
his
of these
legs
ones,
in
it's
there.
a case of slowly sort of getting through some of them. But at the same time, I do love the whole thing. I still think back to the very beginning one of the very first tourist. The thing which has never been heard of before, just randomly coming around. But anyway.
But yes.
Back from the tangent, let's get back in.
I love his Grim Reaper in that his death isn't evil. He's not there to be punishment at the end. He is just...
Exactly.
He's doing his job. I also quite like, and this is another tangent to other popular culture, but there is a meme that I've seen going around where it is the child from The Mandalorian. I won't say his name because his name is a spoiler if you've not seen it.
Yep.
But it's there is a picture of an older child with the pauldron of the Mandalorian on. And underneath the picture there is a discussion between the child and one of the people that the child is teaching.
Right.
And he is basically saying, I thought Jedi weren't supposed to get attached, that getting attached to things led to the dark side. And the child's answer is basically, it is not getting attached, it is the fear of loss of those attachments. So do not fear the loss of the attachment. Because it is natural, it is going to happen. That loss is going to happen, but you can cherish the time that you have with them and move past it. And that is the way that you can have an attachment but stay on the light side.
I like that.
I think they say it a lot better than I've managed to remember it. But that is basic. I like that approach of you don't go to the dark side because you have the attachment. You go to the dark side because you fear losing it.
Yeah.
But if you don't fear losing it, if you know that the loss is going to happen and that it will hurt, but you'll get better. But you were better because you had the attachment in the first place. You didn't cut yourself off from it entirely to begin with.
No. And there is that nice element exactly from that, which is passing is natural. It's something which is going to happen to everything, and you have to accept it. Anything which is natural, you have to accept.
Yes. And obviously we know from the child, the race that the child is, he's going to be long-lived. Because Yoda was 900 and just sort of gave up.
Yes.
So we know that this is a character that is going to be long-lived, that can have an attachment to a lot of different races, a lot of different characters in his lifetime.
Of course.
So, yeah, that's a different thing. I don't really know where that applies to what we're discussing right now.
Not a lot, to be honest, beyond the concept that there is...
but those things are likely to funnel into our world.
Oh, yeah. But with that whole thing that there is one deity which effectively looks after him, and thinking on this whole element of the passing over, I half wonder whether to place them down as a suggestion, nothing more. Or effectively, they are beyond what they were. To a point almost going to a collective of minds, of souls, of energy. You aren't... Once you pass over, you are no longer your race. You are no longer what you were, though you hold and cherish onto those memories. But it's almost like a collective energy of just being. It's something which is beyond explanation. So we're not thinking along the lines of, say, Elysium or anything like that, where effectively you pass and you are yourself and you go into another thing. But you become an energy source, which sort of becomes the reason why the Gygaxian is able to corrupt it and use it in his way. That he corrupts that energy and twists it to a point where it cannot pass over until something is done about it. And this is the reason why ghosts and ghouls don't appear like a race, like a particular thing. They are incredibly corrupted and disgusting apparel of what used to be. Because it can't be one or the other. Effectively, we're talking more along the lines of when you pass on, you literally become just your soul. You have no more mass, no more anything else to distinguish yourself from anyone else and what you are.
Does this happen to every race? Every race goes to this same soul-like afterlife of
the reason why I place it like that is because
stream.
I think that when it comes down, the reason I like that as an idea, but once again, with the whole idea that the Antari might be able to sort of twist and have the different worlds and such forth, and different beliefs and different magics of sorts, is that effectively it's the whole point and reminder, once again, as I would place it, that no one really knows of the afterlife, and no one really knows about the next place, and there are half entrances and ideas that this is what happens. But effectively, because they all come from the same energy, just given different reasons, like even having one of the Antari effectively being one of nature, effectively, or the natural order, which is the reason of the wild ones. The wild ones are actually more an embodiment and a stretch from them. But in the end, we are all from the same energy source. We are all one, and though we might look different, seem different and such forth, when you come to the very end, there's the final understanding that with this collective energy, with this collective mind source, you finally learn that as many differences as you've seen in the physical, there aren't any when you come out of it. Might be getting very philosophical with that.
I mean, the question literally was what happens when they die, so it is asking for the philosophical...
That's true. That is very true. Because the other side of things is, as much as we've placed that down, though, I can imagine the different races having different ideas and different concepts of what happens. Like, I don't know why, I have the feeling that when it comes down to the wild ones, it's almost a lot more Viking-ish than, say, the Avians.
Well, I mean, that's a potentially differing thing of the belief system, and possibly also what the different races do with their dead.
exactly that.
Because I imagine that the Avians probably don't do a lot with them. Because, one, the Avians are quite long-lived, as, like, 500 isn't old in terms of an Avian. We don't know how old they get, but 500 isn't. 500 is young.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're talking in the thousands for the Avians.
In which case, they've been around for a long time, and I can understand, I could certainly believe that there'll be that aspect that once you've reached a certain point, they've reached their end, it's not so much that they've lost someone, it's more a subtle celebration of their life more than anything else, of what they've contributed, their intelligence passed on.
I mean, the other thing is,
really,
they live in the mountains. You aren't burying people at the top of mountains.
Oh, no.
You don't do that.
I could see them a lot more, but when it comes down to it, there is more held to the knowledge which the elder members have passed before they pass on.
Yeah.
Thus the reason behind the libraries. The libraries are a lot more important in that manner because it is the information passed on from those who have passed on. The only part which they really hold that much connection to is the intelligence rather than the actual body. And effectively, the body can be left for the wilderness, the wild, to use as it will, whatever it is needed for. So if it's substance, or whether it be the animals or the plants, it is something which is given to them. As you say, they don't bury them, they just allow them to be carried on, to be used, whether it might be that their bones end up being a part of another creature's nest, or whether their actual essence becomes substance for the bugs and the worms. They realize that it is a part of them going back to the earth, rather than anything else. Whereas, yeah, with the wild ones, it's more along the lines, because of the way that they are, and the way that they believe, and the way they head. Like, as I said, I certainly see a lot more of a Viking sort of style and belief that they are getting ready for almost for another war on the other side, where they will truly go against the Gygaxian, and that they're being called to the next big battle. As for the humans, once again,
humans do what humans do.
Oh yeah. I can imagine even that separated into further and further different divinities as well. Because the humans like to come up with different ideas. If nothing else, the human race is certainly one which is amazing for the sake of coming up with different ideas and different ways to look at every situation. Whether it be right or wrong, they will look at it and believe in it. Thus leading to many a different belief on religion and concept that they will follow. Some which will actually follow along the same lines as the Avians and the wild ones, because if it makes sense to them, they will follow it. Otherwise, they make up what makes sense to them. And being that the Antari, though might be only a minor race, really, for the sake of variety and the different magics and the different things which they have, it would, in my mind, open up for them to believe and, oh no, we believe in this Antari, we believe in that Antari, because these are the Antaris which make sense to us. Which, to be fair, I think opens up to a lot of different concepts on what on earth they would go for when it comes down to a funeral, when it comes down to passing on for the dead. And it would be a case of, if nothing else, you'd hope that they would hold on to a belief. I would certainly say that, if nothing else, though, I think the difficult thing I would place in here is whether or not the humans themselves would actually care about what the person believed in at the time. I believe there'd be some civilizations which would, in which if you believed in, say, the wild ones, then they would give you that kind of funeral. But I believe there'd also be some which would hold so firm to their own belief that no. For them to pass on, they have to be buried in consecrated ground to pass on and be with would be one of those things. Yeah, exactly. There'd be a lot of different rituals and such of which they would follow and believe in. And it's those beliefs that would obviously drive their civilizations however they go.
So, question 4 I'm going to skip, but
Okay.
But in case you're wondering, it questions which creatures are capable of speech.
Yep, that's fair enough, really.
It's those ones at the top.
Yeah, we've pretty
covered
much
that.
already we've established that, so that's fine.
Question 5. What is special about the shape of this world?
Ooh, interesting.
Now, the world... We've not discussed the world a lot. But there is one large continent upon which most of the storylines that we know of take place. And
Okay.
on this continent, along the northern end of the continent, are the mountains that the Avians live in. And the humans live in the south and the east portions of this continent, with the wild ones tending to live in the center and towards the western end of the continent.
Okay.
I believe, if I remember correctly, the western end of the continent is a large wild forest. In the southern and eastern portion, in the southeast portion of the continent, is a ancient swamp, which holds an ancient ruin in the center of it, which is a temple to the Gygaxian, and where his corruption spreads from. His corruption being the swamp itself.
Okay.
We know that in the eastern portion of the world is the largest city of humans, and it is a port city. With a secondary town sort of on the edge of their lands with the wild ones. As much as it's sort of split up and not split up.
Yeah.
The wild ones and the humans mix a lot more than the Avians mix with any other races.
Alright.
And then off of the shore to the east is the golden city of Golian, which is the ancient temple area where humans and the Antari mix.
Interesting.
And the wild ones aren't allowed to go there.
Well, going by what you're saying so far,
I believe in the western end there's further islands in the western end where there be dragons.
Okay. Well, going by what you're saying, I'd be very tempted to go with a Terry Pratchett concept of effectively it's a disc.
Right.
And there is a reason why it is a disc. This is what was already created. Going a bit more with the Antari and what they can do. As a suggestion, more than anything else, so one of the Antari in particular focuses on effectively ice magic of sorts.
Okay.
But the ice magic is effectively the rarest of all the magics. in particular because this one is the one who controls the ring. Literally what stops the water of the world coming off the edges. It is a constant ring going around and building up to a point where we probably have its own believers who have learnt of the magic, pretty much trying to mimic and doing the same thing, not to the same degree on the inside, to alleviate the pressure.
Right.
Literally, the only way to find them is to go to the edge of the world. Everything else lies in the middle of it, the reason why there is one massive continent and a few islands dotted here and there. In difference to the Terry Pratchett idea, and effectively making this in a very different concept, that this is incredibly early on in the world generation and being built, is that there is another Antiphon who is the one of the Earth, who is literally building the rest of it underneath.
Right.
So
it's not a disc world in the sense that it's a world that's a disc. It's a disc world in the sense that that's the bit that's loaded so far.
Exactly. That is the bit which has actually been built. The rest of it is slowly being created. And I really mean slowly being created. This is a magic far beyond anyone's understanding.
So I think the only thing that I would change about that is that it's not another Antari that's creating the world. It's the three gods.
I like it.
Because I'm thinking...
Actually, no, I like that. Especially if, let's say that the Antari are effectively a descendant of the gods themselves, the three gods.
You took the thought that...
Yeah.
I'm thinking, like, there are the three gods, almost like the wizards in The Lord of the Rings are they are, or like angels. They aren't, like, there is the god, or gods in this case, and then there are the divine entities of the Antari.
Yeah.
So basically there is the Antari that is keeping the world contained within the bit that is currently safe and actually formed, and possibly the races that are on it at the moment, they shouldn't be there yet.
No.
But
I mean, even
but
if
it's happened. It's happened
exactly.
now.
I must admit, this is one thing which I do like as a concept, is effectively these gods, these all-powerful beings, can make mistakes.
Whoops.
And that was effectively, they weren't meant to be there, but by sheer accident, life has sprung.
It's gonna do it. Life finds a way. We've discovered this. There's films that state this.
Oh, yeah. Plenty of proof on that one. You just end up having literally Jeff Goldblum come in at one point. Just, no, life finds a way. Because the other side of it that perfectly also shows why you don't tend to see the other gods, the main three. They're currently working on the rest of it.
They're busy. They're busy over there. They're doing the rest of it. They're putting in the porch. They're doing the extension. They're finishing up the sphere shape of this place.
Well, I just like that whole concept of the world is effectively a disc, and it's just big, like, spire growing underneath, which is going to slowly stretch out into everything else of the world, but without any intention. Life started up top, and it said, well, we can't let this just die. Okay, we'll keep this going.
You guys go and deal with that. You Antari go deal with that. Keep them in there.
Yeah.
We'll be over here finishing this. I know it's going to take us a bit longer without your help here, but really you need to deal with that one.
You could even take it another element, which is effectively, they created the Antari to help build, as you say. You maybe a bit more making the details and, structuring everything else.
The Antari of the fjords
accidentally made life.
You weren't supposed
And
to be here yet.
Yeah, and they're now trying to do their best to try and keep that alive whilst everything else carries on around it. I can just imagine literally one of the gods making the magma core whilst everything else is slowly reaching around it.
The god just comes out of the magma core as the other two go, "You'll never guess what's happened."
Yeah. Oh, don't tell me. Don't tell me. Andari. I just like, yeah, when it comes down to it, there's a nice little element there. One sort of holding heed to the good old novels which we like and such. Once again, we're a geek site. We're a nerdy site. We like to sort of do a callback to this, that, and whatnot. But
Yeah.
I like the idea that this is effectively, this is a world in progress. Literally.
I mean, I also love really that we're discussing it very much in the fantasy setting, but we're a video game website. This is a world that's loading.
Exactly.
Like there's a progress bar somewhere going up, and like tooltips happening on a screen somewhere. And
Mr. turns up at one point.
World 1 is happening, but somewhere out there the developers are going, "Oh crap, they're in the open beta."
Just watching. They shouldn't be able to do that. How did they do that?
Oh, we're silly. We're silly people, and this shouldn't be allowed to have this much fun with this.
And once again, this is the fun of world building in the first place. The reason why more people should be doing it. You have no idea what potential you can come out with.
I'm also liking that our notes are now 3 pages long.
Yeah. And we've gone through how many questions?
4.
Yeah. And that goes to say everything, really. 20 questions. Yeah, we're fine with 4.
I think possibly we'll do another one, and then we'll wrap the stream up. One, because I know how long we can talk on a question.
Yeah.
But also because then we get some time to rest tonight. And when we are done with this, we'll do what I'm thinking for this stream is we'll aim to do it every other week surrounding the Golden Tooth, because we have Wednesday nights mostly free for this at the moment. If Ben can't be here, we'll aim to get somebody else in. I'll try and talk to different people, and different people will have different opinions about how different things work, and it'll be cool.
Oh god, yeah.
And
that's the thing, we can
possibly
always put
we'll
more
have
people into this anyway.
Possibly we'll have people as well as just me and Ben to discuss things, but really, apparently, all we need is me and Ben to discuss things.
We're setting sparking life, if nothing else. We know that much.
Yeah. So the next one I've got. The next one I'm going to go with is question 7 on the list.
Okay.
I kind of know some of the answer to this already, but
Right.
we'll go with it. Question 7 on the list. Is there a place here known for peace? And is it easy to find?
Ooh. Now, that's a fun question, I'll say that much.
Now, my initial answer for this is there is the Golden City of Golian.
Okay.
Now, the Golden City of Golian is sort of like in the Lord of the Rings, you have the undying lands of the elves.
Yes.
It's sort of that thing. This is the Golian, the Golden City of the Golian of Golian, not of the Golian, of Golian, is where a couple of Antari went. We'd quite like to experience this world, and poofed into existence.
Okay.
And they built their own city because they'd seen humans doing it, and they'd seen the Avians doing it. So they were like, well, if we're going to live in this world in physical bodies, we need a place to live.
Okay. I like that as a concept, to be honest.
And it sort of feeds into that idea of Drubals has redeemed a stretch.
Yep. Oh.
Which kind of
Thank you very much for that.
In one form of stretching is what we've been doing this whole night, which is stretching for time. But I don't think that's what he meant.
Yeah, that's very true.
But it feeds back into that the gods create the people, but the people create the gods.
Yes.
Which I very much like with sort of Douglas Adams or Neil Gaiman's approaches to religion of it's not just that there are gods and there are people, but you expect a god to act a certain way, and so the god is going to act that way.
I do agree with that as an idea. I do like this whole point of them effectively. They want to come down, they want to have their world and experience it from the perspective of the life which have generated. Even if they've generated it by accident, it's interesting. It's something which sort of catches the attention, especially of these demigods, effectively.
Yes.
They have the intrigue and interest that they think, I want to experience this ourselves, even if they end up giving up a certain amount of power to do so. So
yeah, I think from the
level.
I think from discussions, and obviously this is open to changing things, they can just sort of flip back and forth between being incorporeal and being corporeal, and having a form and having a different form, and being like, oh, I want to be this now, I'm going to be this now, I'm going to...
No, I definitely place it on those sort of lines. They could absolutely choose, and have chosen that when they are in this particular form and living like that, they have made this place for themselves, and have effectively made it, as you say, as peaceful as possible. For whatever reason and whatever manner. It wouldn't surprise me, and one thing which I was thinking is that is effectively one of the Antari. One in particular, which is where the others want to experience everything else and probably would venture forth and come back. Once again, this is more like a home base than anything else. One of them takes pride in this particular area. Now, when an Antari comes back, they don't really mind so much. Really don't care how the Antari interact with this part of the world, because the Antari have a right to interact with this world however they're going to interact. But when it comes down to the other beings, the accidental life forms which they've created,
Yes.
they give them a bit more of a difficult time. I can imagine this one Antari being very much connected effectively to this area in particular, and made it almost spiritual. They haven't fully come out of their form. If nothing else, they have more connected their form to the land itself. They like the land. The bit which they hold true, and the bit which they like, is the nature, is the creatures, is the bits, everything else living in harmony. Not anybody trying to terraform, trying to create a world, trying to do anything like that. so makes it difficult for anything outside of it to come in. And would probably create tests and sorts, where if you were in any manner malicious even to the wildlife, but it would create a harder time for you. So even so much as cutting a vine which happens to be in your way is seen as an attack. And in which case you've got more and more barriers to try and get through, whereas after a while when you start to relinquish that mental approach, and you allow more the peaceful side of things, where there would literally, I can imagine even there being some indigenous people who have come to the point of understanding that if you are peaceful here, you are looked after. You become a part of the environment. Whereas if you are trying to force your way in, you will have a lot more obstacles trying to push you out.
Yeah. We know that in the stories that have been written in the world that we've previously discussed, humans have peacefully made trading arrangements with Golian, and a number of humans can peacefully come to Golian and study the Antari teachings.
Yes.
We know that Eric of the Avians has been to Golian and studied the teachings there. We don't know how the Antari or the people of the Golian, I'm going to call him Golian now, the demigod that that rules over the city, how it feels about the Avians in general. Whether he would be welcoming to them or not. If they come in peace, I guess he would, because that seems to be his general thing of if you're coming here peacefully, if you're willing to trade, if you're willing to give as much as you take, you are welcome here.
Exactly.
We also know that Lotak the Terrible led an army of wild ones in an attempt to take Golian by force, and that that he had felt, I am assuming possibly that he felt that he and the wild ones were being left out in this trade arrangement that the humans had set up, and so attempted to forcibly take what he felt was his right. And he was never seen again, and the wild ones are not welcome in Golian anymore.
Which would make a lot of sense. It would make a lot of sense going along with that effective plot line of sorts, where Golian is very wary of the wild ones. Probably not to the point of actually outright not allowing them in, but because, once again, if we are giving the wild ones a bit of more of that sort of Viking feel, where effectively, because you have heard these stories, and particularly the way the stories would probably come back to them, is that it is very much along the lines of, this is a great conquest and they are stopping us. This is a force, a great nation, a force which is trying to stop us from achieving our goal.
Yeah.
You could certainly see them trying to overrun and force themselves upon Golian.
I also get the idea that it's not so much he doesn't let them in. It's sort of they try to get there and they end up missing.
Yes.
The Stanza Scale has just raided with 2 viewers. Welcome. Welcome in, Stanza.
Hi, nice to see you.
I'm now being given my own chat rules as I try to type in the chat. Stanza scale. I can type things. They were playing Soma. How was your stream going, Stanza? Hey-oh!
Hi. Good to see you.
Yeah, I get the feeling it's not so much a they get there and they can't get in. Like, it's not a solid force field. It's not a mystical thing of they hit some sort of a barrier. It's just they attempt to go there, and whereas a human would go in a straight line and get there, their boat just goes around it.
Pretty much guided without them even realizing it is happening.
Yeah.
And as you say, if you're that persistent, if you're that desperate to try and get in, and it's showing that going against every part of logic which it says to go a different direction, that's when something happens to you.
I mean, I guess the real sort of the follow-up to that question is we've got a heroic group that includes Mira the Mage, who has been to Golian before, who is possibly the current host of Reiki of the Antari.
Yep.
We have Eric the Cleric, who has been to Golian before and learnt under Reiki. And we have Tak,
Yes.
who was originally low tack, but doesn't know that.
No.
What happens if the three of them attempt to, on the same ship, get to Golian? Because 2 out of the 3 of them are allowed and have been there before.
Well, once again, the element is more along the lines of effectively Golian making up their mind as to whether or not the ones trying to get in are going to cause issue. Golian only really cares about the piece of their little segment and keeping that in its own form of order. In which case, I would place it down that they'll potentially be able to get in, but the other side is, with knowing Tak as much as you've told me, I can't see Tak actually bragging about it either.
Well, Tak doesn't remember his time as low tack.
Yeah.
Tak remembers waking up recently and having no memories. But that doesn't really bother him.
Yeah.
That doesn't really bother him because he doesn't know that he doesn't know.
But it's one of those bits, I think, for the sake of the company which Tak will be going with, and the fact that there has become a unity between them, Golian would allow them in. Not to say that they wouldn't end up with issues which Golian would take care of later. So as you say, if they're all on the same ship, I could see Golian allowing them in.
Yeah.
If Tak caused issue within, I can see Golian having enough power to effectively eject Tak.
You suddenly get wholly yeeted out of the Golden City.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm going to put down, I'm going to add to this, humans have set up peaceful trading with Golian, and a number of humans live there as a holy experience. Let the various arts of the Antari, the wild ones led by Lotak the Terrible,
effectively opens up the idea that it doesn't... Golian doesn't care when you come in or anything like that. It doesn't really care about you so long as you don't cause disruption. So long as you're not causing disruption, nothing happens. But you could imagine, effectively, the Wild Ones seeing it, once again, in pretty much a similar manner of looking at the Avians, that you treated us poorly, thus you are an enemy.
Yeah.
But with no memory of being low tack just goes along quite willy-nilly until Tack does something which is a bit more characteristic of himself. Or themselves. In which case, once again, something will happen afterwards, not at the point of trying to get in. It's one sort of placing that Golian is higher in state of mind than the average race, any of the average races. It is along the lines of, look, I really couldn't care what you are, what you're made of, or anything. You literally, so long as you don't do anything, or don't do anything negative, and everything stays peaceful, you're more than welcome in.
I think that he does have a higher bar for the Wild Ones than he does for most other races.
Oh, God, yeah. I would say that when it comes down to it, the Wild Ones, at least in the Golian's mind, there is a reason why they're referred to as the Wild Ones.
Yeah.
Whereas the humans and the Avians, they certainly seem to have a bit more of an understanding of decorum, to say the least. And that's what he holds in higher regard than anything else.
Yeah. I think that's very much the case, is he's much more concerned with you are coming here for the right reason.
Exactly.
But with humans, with the Avians, they can mostly get there unless there's something they're doing.
And once again, I'd place it with, when it comes down to the humans, are probably a prime example of, because the Avians are so high into knowledge, the chances are they're most likely going to be peaceful to come in.
Yeah.
Until something triggers them to be otherwise. When it comes down to the humans, with their vast array and different beliefs and such forth, there will be some who are trying to conquer, there will be some who are just coming in peace, there will be some which are coming in X, Y, and Z, and thus the reason why they're a bit more varied as to whether they are or are not allowed in. But when it comes down to the Wild Ones, thanks to the history which they know of, they're far more keen to try and force their way in than be allowed in.
I mean, I also think that Golian is a person.
Yeah.
He is prejudiced in the same way, like, on a bigger scale, because he's a demigod overseeing an island with a golden city upon it, but he is still an individual.
Of course.
It is still an individual. I'm not 100% sure where we stand on, or where the Antari stand on pronouns. I think they're fairly fluid. Reiki was a she.
It feels like it needs to be. It doesn't feel like something which needs to be nailed down. They should be effectively very fluid.
I think they are.
Unless they make an active choice to be otherwise.
Getting into the brass tacks of it, yes. I think very much that is where we'd sort of discussed it. They are it until they decide to be one or the other. They can pick. There are some of them that flip back and forth. There are some of them that set a gender, because Reiki was definitely a female.
Yes. But once again, there's something which should be an active choice rather than it being something which is inherently amongst them.
Yes.
I feel.
I mean, having a form...
See themselves...
Having a form is not something that is natural to the Antari. They pick and choose whether to exist in the physical form or not. So very much the gender of said form, it can differ day to day.
Oh, of course.
They can change it as much as you change your socks.
Exactly. If they choose to. If they choose to stay with something in particular, then they can stay in that particular, but it's a choice which they make.
Yes.
More than it being so, which is completely down to literally written into DNA and such forth.
Yes. So that is a start. I mean, we've literally got to page 2 of the chapter of the book. So the book has, on fantasy, it starts on page 25 and goes to page 95. And we've got to page 26 so far.
So we're making good progress.
So, you know, things are a little bit interesting at the moment. We're definitely not speeding through it. Let's go with that, shall we?
No, definitely. But the other side of things, this isn't a process which needs to be sped through.
No.
As a key point, I'd say to anyone trying to build a world. In fact, when it comes down to it, the more time you have on it, the more you'll end up thinking about the different things which you'll want to keep as a constant.
I mean, I think some things that should be taken away from this to begin with, from this first session, wrapping up and final thoughts for session 1 of World Building Stream. 1. Take inspiration from anyone and everything. Pop culture, books, shows, movies.
100%.
It's all good. Don't just outright say, don't necessarily just outright say it's a thing, but hey, take inspiration from the things you love.
Exactly.
And similarly, that
is going to get in there anyway.
That can be, the Terry Pratchett books. That can be Star Wars. That can be the Critical Role, Matt Mercer storylines and things. If anybody's watched my D&D streams, you know that I've ripped off some of his ideas and used them as inspiration for my own, because they're good, and why should he have all that fun?
Well, exactly. Plus, the other side of things, inspiration is a pinnacle point on growing anything.
Yeah.
You shouldn't shy away from it.
2.
It's something which anyway.
You don't need all of this to start your world, or to write your stories. When we first wrote in this world in 2018 or 2017, we probably started, because I think that was written very near the start of the year. We actually started releasing things. We had pretty much this bit. So you don't need all of it. I mean, Suntide wasn't named until Chris drew it as a picture for me for my birthday in 2018. This incident that has been forgotten, that came up with tonight.
Yeah.
What happens when people die, we came up with tonight. The fact that Tamrinor itself is a incomplete world and they're currently on a disc that's being extruded, we came up with tonight. Yeah. We've written stories based there. We've told about things that have happened there. We have a lot of backstory of what's happened on this little bit of it. But these elements that we didn't necessarily need in those stories, we hadn't written. But now that they're there, we can take them into future things. We can have interesting things with the lost civilization's ruins. Possibly they are some of the ruins that the group have already explored in stories.
Exactly. We can build upon pretty much all of this. And there are other things which we haven't even touched upon. Once again, we're only page 2 in that book as suggestion.
Yeah. So, don't feel that you need to put all of this work into writing your world before you start playing the game, or before you start writing the story, or before you start writing the script. Whatever you're wanting to do with your world, you know, there are the two ways of doing it. You start the writing and you go, why does this thing happen? Okay, it's because of this other thing in the world. Why does Eric have this? Why is Eric called Eric the Cleric? Oh, it's because his race has a ridiculously long name and everybody has shortened his name to Eric.
Yeah.
You know, naturally go with things.
And that's it when it comes down. Effectively, it's that whole bit between hard world building and soft world building, which is between having the knowledge of everything or going by the feel and the generation and effectively learning by what your characters come across. There are many different ways to build a world, and really it comes down to what on earth comes down takes your inspiration and how you want to do it.
Yeah, there isn't a
This
wrong
is just the
way
way
of
which works
doing
for
it.
us. Well, exactly.
What we will do is, I don't know whether we'll do it. What we'll do is I will export a PDF of this and I will put it in the description of this episode on our website. So when this goes up onto YouTube and goes onto our website, you'll be able to download this in its current state. And we will keep updating this and we'll keep having new PDFs as we go through this series until we have what effectively is the story Bible of Tamrinor, the campaign guide, the you want to write a thing in Tamrinor, this is the resource to look at. And I think all that remains for me to do now is say thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't done so already, please do hit the follow button. It's a great way for you guys to know when we go live, a completely free way that you can support us on the channel. And we're going to say goodnight to Ben, because we're going to go over to this screen where Ben doesn't appear, and say this is what we've got coming up. And I'm also not going to appear on this screen because my camera isn't here. Why is my camera not here? I bet it's because this face cam is trying to use that camera, not this one. There we go. I'm here now. Haha. So, tomorrow night, the Angel Games player is going to be playing some more Bioshock 2 for us. So tune in to see that. I don't know if Jeff is doing a thing on Friday night because I've forgotten to ask him. But on Sunday night, we should be back finally with some more D&D, playing Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage. The group are making their way round to find the vampires that lurk in the northern end of the first level of the dungeon. So we'll see how that goes.
I'm sure it'll go absolutely amazingly.
On Monday night, I'll be playing some more Mass Effect 3 as spoilers. I can't be too careful, Tanny may be listening, but we've made some significant advances in the plot line, and my favourite person's back in the game. And then next Tuesday, Jeff is going to be starting his Call of Cthulhu Reign of Terror. Tune in to see some French Revolutionary Call of Cthulhu. Because that's the thing I didn't expect to have to say.
I can imagine that one's going to be pretty damn cool, I've got to say.
And then next Wednesday we'll be back with hopefully some more Adventures of the Golden Tooth, as the group are currently in Myra Madra. They have gotten a small foothold in the besieged city. They are besieging said besieged city. They have got a small foothold, and they are currently facing off against some orcs and ogres who have just stumbled across them in the town. So tune in for that good time. And we are now going to... Spoilers be happening in Mass Effect 3. Indeed, they do, Stanza. Because I've got someone who sometimes watches this stream who is playing through Mass Effect for the first time and doesn't want to know what happens.
You must always be wary of the spoilers that be happening.
We are going to go and do a raid at Samuel Carmody, who is playing some Back 4 Blood, because that's a very cool game. We'll see you guys again real soon. For now, so long. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.